Welcome to Screen Hollywood, the home of movie news and entertainment. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
What's up, movie fans, and welcome back to Screen Hollywood. It's your host, Adam. If you're new here, hit the like, subscribe, notification bell, and hype button. And bookmark our international news publication at screenhollywood.com. The social media embargo has lifted. The first whispers from the quarantine zone are starting to spread, and the initial diagnosis is in for one of the most anticipated horror sequels in years. The first reactions to 28 years later, The Bone Temple have arrived. Now, before we dive into what the critics are saying, I need to be completely transparent with you all. I have never been a true fan of the 28 Days Later franchise. The concept? Absolutely epic. The execution? In my opinion, they have always underdelivered. The franchise has moments of pure, unadulterated lightning-in-a-bottle brilliance. The opening 15 minutes of 28 Weeks Later is, for my money, one of the greatest and most terrifying horror movie openings of all time. The sequence in that barn, the frantic escape, the boat chase, for those of you who have seen it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's a masterclass in tension and visceral terror. But as a whole, I've always found the films to be anticlimactic. And that brings me to the first film in this new trilogy, last year's 28 Years Later. I found it to be incredibly dull. The pacing was erratic, it was morbid but not in a compelling way, and honestly, it felt like a low-budget student film. I came away from that movie feeling a bit robbed of my time, like I should have just waited for streaming. The only real highlight, the one shining beacon in that film for me, was the phenomenal Ralph Fiennes. He's a solid, classic British actor who effortlessly brings depth and character to every role, and he absolutely elevated the material he was given. So that's where I'm coming from. I was not a fan of the film that set this one up, but the first reactions for The Bone Temple are different. They're intriguing. They hint at a film that is so bold, so strange, and so divisive that it might just be the sequel that finally wins me over. So today, we're going to break down these reactions and see if this is the entry that finally gets the formula right. As always, let me know in the comments if you think I'm missing something. Let's get into the reactions, because the picture they paint is fascinating. The social media embargo lifted for the press who saw the film, which releases on January 16th, 2026, and the consensus is that this is not the movie you are expecting. Let's start with the recurring theme, the word that keeps popping up: weird. Paul Klein says he loved the film, calling it a brutal examination of faith, control, and fear, but adds, "I think people will be shocked by how weird it gets, but I loved it." This is a sentiment echoed by Dimitri Krauss, who called the film brilliant and said it operates on a much weirder wavelength than its predecessor, tackling the idea of a false god in a surprisingly thorny manner. This, to me, is immediately more interesting than the first film. The idea that they are moving away from a straightforward survival horror narrative and into something stranger, more psychological, and possibly bordering on folk horror is a massive point in its favor. And that brings us to the next, and perhaps most shocking point. According to these reactions, this is a zombie movie that isn't really about the zombies. Ryan Hollinger states that The Bone Temple is a brutally audacious follow-up that largely sidelines the infected to explore cultism, trauma, psychosis, and compassion. He goes on to say it's easily more polarizing than 28 Years Later. Now this is a bold move. To take your central threat, the rage virus infected, and push them into the background is a huge creative risk. But it suggests that the filmmakers are more interested in a deeper, more human horror, the horror of what we become when the world ends. The themes of cultism, faith, and false gods suggest a story about the desperate search for meaning in a meaningless, rage-filled world. That is a far more compelling premise to me than just running from fast zombies again. The creative team behind this is a huge reason for this shift. While Danny Boyle and Alex Garland are producing, directing duties for this middle chapter were handed to the incredible Nia DaCosta. She is a true rising star, the director behind the visually stunning Candyman and the upcoming Hedda. She brings a distinct, artistic, and often more psychological approach to genre filmmaking. The fact that she was reportedly convinced to take on the project by Jonathan Glazer, the visionary director of The Zone of Interest, tells you everything you need to know about the high-minded, ambitious tone they were aiming for with this film. This isn't just a sequel, it's an auteur-driven horror film. And of course, the script comes from the mind of Alex Garland himself. When you hear themes of cults, psychosis, and complex morality, that is pure Garland DNA. This is the writer who gave us the cerebral sci-fi of Ex Machina and Annihilation. It seems he's using this trilogy to really dig into the philosophical fallout of his own creation. The praise for the film's depth continues with Matt Neglia, who says the Bone Temple deepens the franchise's lore with new questions and some long-awaited answers in the quietest yet undeniably most brutal installment of the series. Quiet and brutal. That is a fascinating combination that speaks to a more atmospheric, dread-filled experience rather than a loud, action-packed one. And, thankfully, the praise for my favorite part of the last film is unanimous. Ralph Fiennes is once again being hailed as the MVP. Neglia says he is truly phenomenal here, adding new poetic layers of complexity to his character. Zach from the Film Buzz says he concludes Kelson's character brilliantly. It seems Fiennes' character, Dr. Ian Kelson, gets a complete and powerful arc in this installment. The cast is rounded out by the fantastic Jack O'Connell as the villainous Sir Jimmy Crystal and Aaron Kellyman, who we know from The Falcon and The Winter Soldier. Finally, let's talk about its place in the trilogy. This is the second of 3 films. Middle chapters are notoriously difficult to get right, but according to Cat Hughes, The Bone Temple is exactly how you do a middle chapter of a trilogy. This suggests a film that successfully builds on the first entry while powerfully setting the stage for Danny Boyle's grand finale. So, after all this, where does a skeptic like me land? Honestly, I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm genuinely excited. The film I disliked, 28 years later, sounds like it was a slow, deliberate, and perhaps necessary setup for this. Everything the critics are describing about the Bone Temple, that it's weirder, more psychological, more polarizing, and less focused on the infected, is everything I wanted from this franchise in the first place. The fact that it's being called audacious and uncompromising suggests that Nia DaCosta and Alex Garland have created a film on their own terms, not just a paint-by-numbers sequel. They took a massive swing, and for a franchise that I felt was becoming stale, a massive swing is exactly what it needed. The student film vibe I got from the last one might just be replaced by a true auteur-driven vision. My biggest fear has been assuaged. They didn't just repeat the formula, they broke it. And I, for one, cannot wait to see the beautifully weird, brutal, and complex pieces that remain. What do you guys think? Do these first reactions get you more excited? And for the fans of the first 28 years later, am I completely wrong about that film? Was it a misunderstood setup for this bigger story? Let me know your full, detailed thoughts in the comments below. As always, if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to Screen Hollywood, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. I'm Adam, and I'll see you at the movies.